Now, there are many accomplished and very famous writers who live and have lived here in Essex. Dorothy L. Sayers springs to mind, as does Martina Cole, Joseph Conrad, to name just a few. But there are some very, very successful writers from our county that you might not have even heard of, which is what my next guest's book is all about. It's called Famous Essex Authors You Have Never Heard Of. And earlier this morning, I spoke to author Dee Gordon.
Hello, hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, fine. Had the launch last night, so that was quite exciting.
And how did it go?
It was fine. The mayor actually turned up, and the mayor bought a book. Quite unusual for mayors, in my experience.
Whereabouts in Essex was it, Dee?
It's in the centre of Southend, really, because I'm in Westcliff, so it's quite a handy place, yeah.
Well, congratulations on the launch of the book. And I have to say, I love the title, first of all. Famous Essex Authors That You Have Never Heard Of. It just does exactly what it says the book does. And, you know, actually, I'm hoping that the book becomes so successful that the title is out of date. Because eventually it'd be nice if it was Famous Essex Authors That We Have Now All Heard Of because we read your book, Dee.
Absolutely, yeah.
So why did you decide to delve into the history of some of our possibly forgotten writers? Where did this whole idea come about?
Well, really, I've always been obviously I'm interested in books, and I've also been interested in writers, you know, how they write, what they write, when they write, where they write. And so for quite a few years, I've been looking into writers from Essex, historic writers from Essex, really, rather than modern writers from Essex, just to see what they're about and to delve into their books. And I was just really surprised that I uncovered one after another, people that I'd never heard of. And the collection got so vast, I thought, well, A, there's enough for a book, and B, these people should be out there. People should be reading their books, you know. Some of them, their books, unfortunately, will be now out of print. I'm talking about the 17th and 18th century writers, although places like Abe Books online, you know, these obscure booksellers online that do obscure books, you can still get copies of some of these very old books for hundreds of pounds. I mean, the writers would be stunned to see what they sell for compared to what they would have earned in the first place. But yeah, so I'm not focused on modern writers, partly because it changes. It takes a year from finding a publisher to getting that book into the shops. And during that year, if you're writing about a contemporary writer like Richard Osman or somebody, then in that year things will change. You know, they get divorced, they get ill, they get better, they get MBEs, and you know, so it's out of date virtually as soon as your pen hits the page, unless you're writing for a journal or for something that comes out very, very quickly, but not for a book.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the people that you've discovered along this journey of yours? And were there any kind of real surprises that you came across?
Yeah, there's one chap from Basildon was a surprise simply because he was from Basildon. I'd read all his books and I hadn't thought about or read about where he came from. And then his books were turned into a television series, which is what made him not a household name at all, but at least got him to the stage where he could give up his day job and he could earn a good living. And all the time he stayed in Basildon. And his name is R.D. Wingfield. See, it's silence at the other end of the phone. So that means you don't know R.D. Wingfield. Now, he's the chap that wrote all the books about Jack Frost, the detective.
Oh,
Jack
wow,
Frost.
okay.
Yeah,
from Basildon?
Yeah, from Basildon. So I'd read all the books before I saw the TV series. I preferred the books. I'm not sure about David Jason.
I was going to say, starred David Jason, of course, on the TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Wingfield himself wasn't that sure about David Jason in the role, but it was David Jason who instigated the television series because he'd read a copy of one of his books. He'd enjoyed the book, and so he initiated the idea of him actually making a television series. But he was actually doing quite well even before that, because he wrote radio plays. He was working at Ford's, and he wrote a play, sent it off to the BBC, and they took it, and from there they took quite a few other radio plays, and that was what. And then he was approached to, well, can you turn one of these plays into a book? And that's where it really took off. But yeah, R.D. Wingfield, so he's one of my favourites, if you like, and he's one that people tend not to have heard of. There will be a few people, I couldn't not include some of the famous people, people you mentioned, Conrad, didn't you? And people like Ruth Rendell and Dorothy L. Sayers. I couldn't not include them because it seemed ridiculous, but I couldn't call the book Famous Essex Authors You've Never Heard of apart from half
a couple that you might have. Looking into all these authors and finding out not just about the books that they wrote, but about them. As people as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've read a few reviews about your book, and there's one that I read yesterday that stuck out a little bit that I thought I'd read to you.
Yeah, go on.
You might have read this yourself, actually. It says, I loved this book. The writer obviously loves books to have discovered so many interesting, unheard of Essex authors and gives an insight into their fascinating backgrounds. It then says, reading this book, my view of Essex has been changed forever. It has a rich cultural base. Yeah. And then it says, the fold-out map adds to the appeal of the book. We all have a fold-out map, of course we do, but I think it's nice when they say that their perception of Essex has changed, having read your book, and I think there is a certain perception still of Essex, but, it's such a creative county. It's a creative hotbed of people, even Rob Jelly on our Upload programme last night was talking about a young author and how she goes about getting her books published and things like that. And, I think it's great when we hear that people are surprised how much creativity does come from our county.
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you a story which links into that. When I first was pitching the idea of this book, I was using a different working title, and my working title was Literary Essex. And one publisher came back to me saying, I don't feel literary and Essex belong in the same sentence.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to know your response, but I don't know if it might be broadcastable, so we might have to move on. But
okay, well, it was an email, so I had time to think about it and not explode on the other end of the phone. Yeah, so... But once I changed the title and I approached a different publisher, we got there in the end.
I just going back to what they said about the map, there is a really nice map in your book where you actually pinpoint across our county where the authors have a connection to within Essex. It's really, really lovely, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, that was, I have to say, it was the publisher's idea, the map. But he's produced a map of Essex with all the names on, and you can see there's quite a cluster around Southend, I'm proud to say. But there's also quite a cluster around Ilford, Dagenham, that part of the world where it's been swallowed up by Greater London to some extent now.
Yeah.
So in the 70s when all the boundaries changed. But then there are remote spots where you get one or two people like Dorothy L. Sayers. It's spread right across the county, I'm pleased to say.
Famous Essex authors you have never heard of. Dee, whereabouts can we buy the book? Where can we get it from?
Right, so you can obviously get it from Amazon, like all books these days. You can get it from, at the moment, the publisher's website, which is it's 100 Essex, or it's Essex 100, I'm really sorry. I'm waiting for Waterstones to put in their order. There's a couple of local bookshops near where I live in Southend that have got it. Yes, it will be around in the very near future.
Dee, I wish you all the very best, the success with this book. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to me this morning on BBC Essex about it. How are you spending Easter, by the way, Dee? What are you getting up to?
Well, I'm a carer. I've got an autistic son. He's an adult, but... so he's a bit of a handful, so I'll be keeping him under some sort of control over the next few days.
Thank you so much for coming on this morning, Dee.
Okay, nice to speak to you. Thank you.
What a joy it was to speak to Dee Gordon this morning before the programme today on BBC Essex. And Essex100.com is the website you can go to get a copy of her book.
When I was 6 years